For the last 6 months, I've been working on this dagger in my apartment. Today I'm going to take you guys through a full budget breakdown of this dagger, how much I spent to make this, and what the minimum amount that you could possibly spend to make this is. If you're interested in making a knife or a dagger similar to this one or your own design, it's totally up to you. I'm going to put an affiliate link to everything that I use to make this dagger in the description for this video. So if you want to support this channel, I do get some kickback from those, so feel free to use those links if you're interested in starting knife making, which I do recommend. So for a little bit of context here, I actually have a lot of tools already, but they're in Minnesota, I'm in Texas, that's pretty far a ways away. I also live in an apartment, so something like a belt grinder or a forge and an anvil just are not gonna cut it down here. However, I did not want that to stop me from making knives, so I decided to start working on this dagger. And I'm rounding up to the nearest dollar, okay? So if you're gonna be out there like, actually I found the same table vise for $17.33. I'd say, stop it, okay? The first thing I got for this was a table vise. A table vise has been my best friend since I first started knife making. It's such a good way to make sure that whatever you're working on is secure and that you can get all those fine details in there without worrying about it slipping, and also just change the angle of whatever you're working on and have a lot more control over that. So table vise, that cost me $18. Next up is going to be the wood that I used for this dagger. Now you can find cheaper wood, however, I wanted something very pretty. I went with stabilized burl, and that cost me $40. Next up, sandpaper. I got 2 of these. If you really hated yourself, you could probably get away with just 1 set of sandpaper. I got from I think it was 80 grit all the way up to 1500, 2000, 2500 grit. So I got 2 of those. Total cost is gonna be $26. Next up, I got a half round file. Half round files, I really like them. I think they're just very versatile, and it's a little bit of a finer cut than a bastard file, so I wanted to have one of those just so I had the option to if I needed to. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's mandatory, but that cost me $8. Next up, I got rotary discs for my Dremel. Now, I'm not including the Dremel in the cost for this video. And the reason is I've had it already since I was a kid. So if you don't have a Dremel, that sucks. You're probably gonna have to get one. You can absolutely start knife making without a Dremel. You don't need one. And honestly, if you have a drill lying around, you can buy Dremel bits and use them in the drill. It's not gonna work as efficiently, but if you're in a pinch or whatever the case may be, you can absolutely just use a drill. And if you don't have either of those, you should probably have a drill at the house anyways, just for house maintenance. So just get a drill or something like that. But anyways, I got rotary discs for my Dremel for cutting out the shape for this file. That cost me $7. Next up, C-clamp. C-clamp is important. You gotta be able to clamp your stuff down. Okay, you don't want your stuff going all loosey-goosey when you have rotary tools on them. So that cost me $3. Probably this is the cheapest thing that I got. It was pretty cool. It's a little bent now. It's not, it didn't last very long, but that's okay, it was only $3. Next up, brass knobs. I used brass knobs for the pommel for this dagger. And the reason I did that was just because they were already round. I didn't have to worry about trying to round them out. And also they were threaded, so I had a way to mount them to the bottom of the dagger when I was done. I got a 2-pack because that's all they offered. If you're not gonna use my affiliate link and you wanna do this, make sure that the cabinet where you buy is actually brass, because I got freaking lied to at Home Depot originally when I got some cabinetware for this, so just keep your eyes out for that. Those brass knobs cost me $14. Next up, set of needle files. This cost me $8. The only thing I really used this for was fitting the guard up to the tang of this knife, which is pretty important, so I would definitely recommend getting them, and a set of needle files is just good to have around your house anyways, if you're planning on getting into knife making. Up next, flat bar brass. This was used for the guard for this dagger. This cost me $26. Next up, we got a hacksaw. I used the hacksaw quite a bit during this project. I used it for cutting out parts of the guard. I used it for the handle, all sorts of fun stuff. So you're probably gonna want one of those. That cost me $9. It was actually pretty cheap. Most of the tools really are not that expensive. I was very surprised. Next up, drill bit set. I got a small drill bit set again for hollowing out the center of this guard to fit it up on the tang. That cost me $13 for the full set. Now you could buy the individual drill bit. One drill bit was $6 or a set of 50 for $13. So I decided to go with that. Then I got a 10-inch bastard cut file. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, whoa, let's be nice to the file. We don't know if he's a bastard or not, all right? That's quite rude. You've never even met the guy. But bastard cut is actually just a specific type of cut for a file. It's just the way that the grooves are lined up, and it's just a very intense cut. It's the equivalent to like a lower grit sandpaper basically. So it removes more material than like the half round file would. So I wanted one of those for just mass stock removal there. Then I got two 12-inch files. One of these 12-inch files is for the dagger, so you're definitely gonna need that. The other 12-inch file that I got for this was used for filing down the brass on this dagger. If you're really good at planning ahead, you can use the bastard cut file to shave the brass down to whatever you want it to be. However, as soon as you touch steel with that file, it's not gonna work well on brass anymore because it becomes a little bit more dull and it just doesn't cut into the brass very much. The other reason it would be good to get a second 12-inch file is because brass stick into the file and just kind of jam it up. There are ways around that. You can put a little bit of chalk in the files to keep them from getting jammed up. That being said, still nice to have a nice fresh file for when you're working on a softer metal like brass, in my experience. So got two of those files. That cost me $24. Next up, wood rasp file set. I use this to shape the handle for this dagger. You're probably gonna wanna get those. It's gonna cost you $17. And then we needed a way to sharpen this bad boy because I'm not gonna be walking around with a dull knife. Okay, that's just ridiculous. So that was $10 for that whetstone. And then epoxy to hold everything together. I got a 2-pack, I think, because that's what they offered. And I don't know, I don't make the rules. That cost me $15. A file guide. I was so adamant about not using a file guide for the longest time, and I finally broke down and got it. And guys, I'm telling you, just get the file guide. Like, you're thinking, oh, I can eyeball it. You can't eyeball it, okay? It's just not gonna be good, especially when you're trying to make this part flat on the ricasso for the dagger. It's a hassle, so just get a file guide. It's gonna save you so much time and headaches. That cost me $24. Then I got a chainsaw file set. Highly, highly recommend getting chainsaw files. They're meant to resharpen chainsaw blades, which are hardened steel. So they're really tough, they're really good. I use them to make a lot of the decorative parts of the guard of this dagger. So definitely recommend grabbing you a couple chainsaw files. I got a 12-pack, it was 25 bucks. One of the best purchases you can make, to be honest. And then lastly here, I got a propane torch. You're gonna need this if you want to heat treat your blade, as well as if you are working with hardened steel, you can use that to anneal that steel, make it softer again. So all that being said, that's everything that I bought for this project. Total was $357. Not bad, not bad. Okay, honestly, you know, paying $357 for this bad boy, that's kind of a steal. We're not gonna talk about labor costs. $357, honestly not horrible if you consider the kinds of hobbies that you can start. $357, that could get you like the cheapest snowboard you've ever purchased in your life. 1/10 of a mountain bike. Not bad in terms of hobbies that you can start. I would say that knife making can be cheap. That being said, I bet we can make that a little bit cheaper. So how can we make this dagger or something similar to this for the minimum amount possible? So I broke down this list into things that are good to have and not good to have, and I've come up with a list of things that you would absolutely need for making this dagger. So we're gonna need the maple burl. That's for the handle. You gotta have a handle on the dagger. That's gonna cost you 40 bucks. You can't get away with one set of that sandpaper. That's gonna cost you $13. C-clamp. You're gonna want a C-clamp. It's just, you're gonna need it. Table vise, I wouldn't say that this is like a need, but it's just gonna save you so much time and bring the quality of what you're doing up so much. Like, I can't even make a recommendation for a cheap knife making startup set without a table vise. So that's gonna cost you 18 bucks. Brass knob, gonna need that, $14. Set of needle files, that's gonna cost you $8. Flat bar of brass, that's gonna be $26. Hacksaw, gonna need that, $9. Drill bit set's gonna cost you $13. 10-inch bastard file is gonna cost you $10. One 12-inch file, you can use that bastard cut file for the brass if you absolutely hate yourself, if you're limiting yourself to one file. You totally can do that. 12-inch file, just one of those, $12. Wood rasp set, that's gonna be $17. A whetstone to sharpen the whole thing, 10 bucks. You're gonna want some epoxy, $15. And lastly, some chainsaw files. are gonna cost you $25. If you're looking to make a dagger like this for the least amount possible, so you're looking at $233, which really, honestly, in my opinion, is not horrible. Everything I bought was off of Amazon. You can absolutely go on Facebook Marketplace, find some people with way cheaper tools, way cheaper equipment, all that kinds of stuff. You can even find scrap metal that's high carbon steel for relatively cheap on Facebook Marketplace. But if you were looking to do this for as cheap as possible with new tools, it's gonna cost you $233. So that is the amount I spent and the minimum amount necessary to make this dagger. And if you wanna see in more detail how I made this dagger from start to finish in my apartment, go ahead and check out that video on my channel and stay tuned for the next project.